Mr. Carter, did you, you had a recommendation to move up the discussion of the Broadband Committee and the Railroad Task Force?
Yeah, during the work session, we could, please. I'd appreciate that. The other thing, and that's on the work session. The other thing, too, is I know Mr. Daly had requested that we give him the list of our top candidates for that job, and I don't know if my suggestion was he's put together a spreadsheet. He can give that out tonight. That way we can review it, and maybe there's somebody that Ms. Cullors saw that I'd maybe take another look at. Maybe somebody I put on there that maybe she wanted to take another look at, and I just don't know how long it's going to go tonight. But my suggestion would be on next Tuesday when we have a regular meeting that we meet at 6, because at least it will be fresh. Because I don't know, it'll probably be another long meeting, and that's okay. But at least I think while we're fresh and we can think about it and stuff like that, we can decide then who we want to bring in for interviews, if that would be acceptable to the rest of the board, if that makes sense.
6 o'clock next.
6 o'clock
next Tuesday instead of 7 o'clock normal.
Well, yeah, and the 6 o'clock would more or less be like a work session type of thing, to just do interviews. And that way we've got a little bit of a time limit. And there, because I don't really want to discuss this, I don't know how long the meeting's going to go next week. I know what's on the agenda, but I don't think it's a good idea to start discussing this at 10, 10:30 or whatever. I think we need to be fresh, because this is probably the most important decision that this board makes for the upcoming years. So if that's okay, we'll push that back. Mr. Daly can hand out or email his spreadsheet tonight or tomorrow or whenever, if that works.
Yes, I will email them to you tomorrow. We're going to put this, that 6 o'clock is a work session and the regular meeting is 7 o'clock.
Correct.
And
Doesn't it, it has to be a closed session because we're talking about personnel matters,
Right.
correct?
Right.
How you do
It
that.
should be.
Yes,
It doesn't have to be. It
Should be.
I think it should be,
Oh, I definitely agree.
yeah.
That's good.
okay.
So we can do a closed work session if need be. All we have to do is advertise.
Mr. Fox, is that okay with you? Mrs. Collins? Mrs. Oates? It's fine with me.
Thank you.
Mr.
The other
Chairman?
question,
I'm sorry.
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry,
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'll come back.
You called me a goat head twice. But the other thing too, on item D, we also have, I'm assuming, Mr. Hand, we have a closed session on that same item, so I guess we want to defer that till after the closed session. Is that correct?
I would like to,
NE.
I will recommend that when we get to it, that you table D
And
and E based on new information. I
Is
got
your,
for-
is your microphone on?
Pardon?
Is your microphone on?
Well, the green light is on. I don't know if it's on, however.
Okay, all right, I hear you better now. That's fine. Okay, so we get to item D, we table, and then we go into closed session, and then we come back and take action if need be, correct?
I'm not sure it would be fruitful taking action on D or E tonight.
Okay.
I'm happy to talk about that now or when we get to those items.
Okay,
That's okay. But we still need to do item F before we go into close.
yes, correct.
Okay. Any more corrections at all before we go, Mr. Daly?
Mr. Chairman, before we begin the agenda, wanted to ask the treasurer if she could make a little announcement for us.
Absolutely.
Can I take this off while I talk? Thank you.
Unless you can talk through that fast.
I'll really be huffing and puffing trying to talk. Okay, I'm here tonight to speak to you about the recent press release regarding a check fraud incident with the Treasurer's Office. My office received notification from our bank's local branch, as well as a victim of the scam, about a potential fraud on one of the county's accounts. This particular account is used only by the Treasurer's Office to issue tax refunds on accounts. The fraudulent checks were being sent with a letter titled Secret Surveyor Evaluation and gave the following instructions to the victims. Confirm receipt of the package by email or text. Confirmation should include the amount that was received, the bank name on the check, the victim's phone number, and estimation time to complete the evaluation. The fraudulent checks needed to be deposited by ATM, mobile, or bank deposits and completing the assignment within 24 to 48 hours means they got more of a bonus. Once the fraudulent checks were deposited, the victim was to deduct a portion of the funds to keep for themselves and then purchase eBay gift cards at 2 different locations with the remaining funds. After the gift cards were purchased, the victim was to provide the store name, the store address, the name of the cashier, the date and the time of the visit, their overall experience of the purchase, and a front and back copy of the card. The scammers were adamant about sending the information by text. As of today, there haven't been any local recipients, and there has been no money lost due to this fraudulent checks. The entire purpose of the release was to provide transparency and awareness to the community. I want to thank the Sheriff's Office for handling the press release and to let the community know that if they have any questions, to contact the Treasurer's Office directly. I think that's all I have, unless you guys have some questions for me.
So if it looks like a scam, it probably is.
Yes, and we'll be glad to talk to anybody if they have a question about a legitimate tax refund that we've sent. We'd rather people call than be out money, but it comes with a letter saying it's for a survey, like a smart shopper, secret shopper, I think is what the name of it is. Yeah, but again, we're very lucky that with the bank that we have and the precautions we take, we do not lose any money.
Thank
I
you
think
very
the
much.
lesson here is don't buy gift cards for anybody. Yes. If they ask you to get a gift card, it's a scam.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
We appreciate your time. Next on our agenda is the agreement with the Front Royal County Chamber of Commerce for the use of the federal CARES relief funds for small businesses. Mr. Ham and Mr. Daly.
The Chamber has requested some changes to both agreements, and this is the first one that has to do with the funds to small businesses. The revised agreement is in your package. The Chamber has seen this and has agreed to it. If you all have any questions, let me know.
And the Chamber's okay with this? And,
Yes, according to the Chamber President, they are good with that.
okay. Because I think this could have been wrapped up a little bit sooner, but the Chamber President, maybe, when we were talking in the CARES Act, Ms. Cullors remembers, he kind of zoomed out, and he missed a lot of the discussion, which would have clarified a lot of things. So the important thing is to get this done as quickly as possible so we can start dispersing the funds and helping out the people that really need it.
And Mr. Ham, that's already in his hands, isn't it?
Yes, Mr. Bramble and I, the Chamber President, we got their changes and we went back and forth and organized some things. He has seen this on Friday, but so before this went out in your agenda package, he specifically blessed it, and he had shared it with the, just having a look here as to who's actually signing it. He had shared it with Nikki Foster, the president, as well, and so Mr. Bramble told me that she was okay to sign it as well, both agreements.
Now, do we need to approve this tonight?
Yes, there's a motion in your package.
You want to read that for us?
I move that the Board of Supervisors of Warren County authorize the execution, delivery, and performance of the agreement with the Chamber of Commerce of Front Royal and Warren County for the use of Federal CARES Act coronavirus relief funds, the business grant agreement, and approve a modification to the prior appropriations to the Chamber to allow $200,000 of the funds to be distributed to the Chamber upon signing the business grant agreement.
Second.
Any additional comments, concerns, questions?
Just one thing, and I think I understand it, and Mr. Ham or Mr. Farrell, it says 200,000. That's the first go-round. Once that's depleted, there's another amount of money. I just want to make that clear. We're not limited to 200,000, but it's going to be additional amount
Underwrite checks.
based on the pillar, tower, pot, or whatever. So Okay, I just want to make that clear.
One, I think it should be clarified that the $200,000 is not to the chamber. It's for
No.
the chamber to disperse to CARES Act recipients. So I think that clarification should be made as well.
Correct.
Right.
But, I mean, the agreement states who they can give it to,
Right.
and they can only provide money to entities that have been approved by the Warren County CARES Act Committee that you all appointed the last meeting.
And this is pretty much the first round of money, or it's all kind of the
This
same,
is
it's got
all-
a second round too?
Together.
It's all put
Okay.
together at this point.
And the other thing I'd like, and I talked to Mr. Farrell, or emailed him, I think another entity out there that is deserving too, that, and that's the nonprofits. And we can look at that at the second go-round. I think the town based their distribution on having a business license, and most of the nonprofits do not have business licenses. So, and most of the nonprofits are probably located in the town of Front Royal. So that's something we need to coordinate with the town and take that into account for the second round and set aside a certain amount of money for them too, because they're hurting as well, and they provide a tremendous service. And they also save us money in the long run by taking care of things that otherwise would probably go to DSS. No offense.
Mr. Farrell and I had actually already been talking about that.
Good.
Mr. Daly's been talking with us as well.
Good, good. Thank
I think
you.
we're on target there.
Yes, sir, appreciate that.
Mrs.
So-
Shiraki? Oh, go ahead.
There's been I made the motion, Tony seconded
Right.
it, so we just need to vote.
And Mr. Shiraki, could we get a roll call on this, please?
Mr. Carter?
Aye.
Ms. Oates?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Ms. Cullors?
Aye.
Mr. Fox?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Next thing on our agenda is the agreement with Front Royal Warren County Chamber of Commerce for the use of federal CARES coronavirus relief funds for individual assistance with utility payments. Mr. Hammond, Mr. Daly again.
Again, per my prior comments, the chamber has seen this agreement as well and has agreed to it. It has a similar provision for seed money, obviously less because there's $413,000 total to be distributed under this for folks that are having trouble with their utility bills, and this provides for $50,000 in seed money.
Any questions for Mr. Ham?
So these folks are going to be identified by the Department of Social Services. They will make recommendation. They'll apply to the CARES Act funds and then be reimbursed or given the funds after that transaction is complete, correct?
Yeah, DSS is involved in this. The ultimate body that decides is the CARES Act Committee.
Right.
And I understand that there are various members on the CARES Act Committee that are actually DSS members as well.
Applications will go through the chamber, and they will go to DSS from the chamber. And then if they are eligible, which will be determined over at DSS, they will send it back to the chamber, and the chamber will then write the check for the amount designated. And we will use the $50,000 as the seed money for reimbursing them as they go.
Very good.
Yeah, because DSS is basically vetting the recipients.
Yes.
And we looked at this 9 ways to Sunday,
Committees
that we
gonna-
cannot give it directly to the utility. We have to give it to the individual.
Correct.
And I know that the chamber had a little bit of concern about giving it to the individual, and maybe they don't put it towards utility bill. I think 95% of the people will. But the main thing we need to do, and I know Mr. Ham will agree, we just need to make sure we comply with the protocol of the CARES Act. And if we do that, we're okay. We want to help people. And again, it's going to be up to DSS to make sure it's properly distributed. And I don't know if we want to add to the motion or not, that if it's not properly distributed, we hold Beth responsible.
Yeah,
But no.
it's the CARES Act is the entity that, under the agreement, that provides the approval, but it goes through DSS
Right.
as well.
And they'll be the ones vetting it, so.
Yes, and that's all really I have to say about it.
No, and that's it. I mean, you know, like I said, the chamber had a little bit of heartburn, but I think has been clarified and rectified, and And just like I said, let's move forward and help the people we need to help.
Since you're holding her responsible for this, sir, we'll get to our new director in a bit, but he's going to be taking over the agency and administering that, and she's going to focus the next couple of weeks on the CARES Act for us.
Okay. Very good. We appreciate that.
All that being said, do we have a motion?
I move that the Board of Supervisors of Warren County authorize the execution, delivery, and performance of the agreement with the Chamber of Commerce of Front Royal and Warren County for the use of federal CARES Act coronavirus relief funds in order to provide utility funds to those in need and whom have been affected by the pandemic, the Utilities Grant Agreement, and approve a modification to the prior appropriations to the Chamber to allow $50,000 of the funds to be distributed to the Chamber upon signing the Utilities Grant Agreement.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Fox?
Second.
Any additional concerns?
Just again, the same thing as the other agreement with the chamber. That 50,000 is the initial amount. There's, I think, I'm going to say maybe 120 total, somewhere along that. So once that's dispersed, there's other monies that will be dispersed for other recipients.
Yeah, it's $413,020 total. So the $50,000 is, the chamber doesn't have a bunch of money in the bank where they can send it out to people and then come back with receipts and return checks. So they need that to start the process.
Very good.
Any additional questions? Roll call, please, Mrs. Shiraki.
Mr. Fox?
Aye.
Ms. Cullors?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Ms. Oates?
Aye.
Mr. Carter?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Item number D is the agreement with the Town of Front Royal for the use of federal CARES coronavirus relief funds. Mr. Ham?
So we have had 2 telephone conferences with town staff. Mr. Daly and I were on the phone with Matt Tiedrick, Doug Napier, George Sonnet, and a few other people from the town. The sticking point is that the town, as a condition for signing, or we had not, and I had detailed during the last meeting, our attempts to get the town to commit to what they actually wanted in an agreement, and we did not have that until very recently. The town wants the money up front without having to provide documentation, and basically wants some other changes to the agreement too. And I would like this to be postponed or tabled and for us to discuss it tonight. Approving an agreement tonight is not going to be fruitful because there isn't one that's acceptable to your legal counsel that's also acceptable to the town. But I would like to discuss this in closed session as to how to proceed.
We can discuss it in closed session if everyone is okay with that.
Well, it's already on.
It's already on
For
there.
a closed session.
Yeah, so are we
there's-
we're tabling this for tonight and we're just going to discuss it in closed session? Will we come out of closed session and vote on an agreement that we agree on? No?
Probably not, but,
Okay.
I don't
So
know what
then
you
D
might
and
decide.
E are just tabled.
I would suggest a motion to table it.
All right, so I'll make the motion to table D and E until some time in the future.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Shiraki, could we get a roll call for these 2, please?
Mr. Carter?
Aye.
Ms. Oates?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Ms. Cullors?
Aye.
Mr. Fox?
Aye.
Thank you. Item number F is 2020 Warren County Board of Supervisors meeting policies and procedures. Mr. Ham?
So these revised policies and procedures allow for supervisors to participate remotely up to twice per year for a personal matter, if they're out of town for whatever reason, and provides a procedure for that. That's allowed by FOIA. The modifications also change the public comments period. Right now, we have two public comments period. We have an agenda public comments period and a public comment period. And the problem with that is that we always get into this back and forth as to, and people get it wrong as to which public comments period they're in. And so you immediately end up questioning whoever it is that wants to present about what they're talking about, which is kind of unpleasant and time consuming. So, and it's just my suggestion that we combine the two comment periods. Right now there's 15 minutes for 45 minutes for the agenda public presentation comment period and 15 minutes for the general public comment period. My suggestion is to combine these two that add up to 60 minutes into one 60-minute public comment period where people can talk about whatever they want to talk about. And then, Mr. Chairman, you don't need to interrupt people and question them as to, whether or not they're on the right part in the agenda. And that is a policy decision for you to make, but it would be my suggestion. And then there's a sort of ministerial change to section 3-1 order of business to take into consideration the condensing of the two public comments period, the 15 minutes and the 45 minutes into one 60-minute period. Also provides for a 3-minute limit per speaker. Right now we have a situation where the time is to be divided by the number of speakers. That's never works in practice because people show up at the meeting that have not signed up. And of course, we want to hear from the public, and so that doesn't really work very well. And the Gettysburg Address was less than 3 minutes. The thought being 3 minutes is sufficient time for most people to make their point.
Any questions for Mr. Ham?
Mr. Ham, if we have, so what you're saying is if we have a 60-minute time period and there's 3 minutes per speaker, that gives you 20 speakers.
Yes.
Should we have 30 people sign up? Would we be able to shorten the length of time that they speak to make sure that this stays within a 60-minute time frame?
Well, a couple things. First of all, people fall into two categories. They either talk for less than a minute or they talk until they are asked not to. So I actually think that it's not going to be 3 minutes times 20 people. I think it's going to be much more than 20 people. And I think in most circumstances, this is going to get the job done. If it doesn't, the board can always vote to change its rules, or the chairman always has some discretion to allow those to speak. And I know, our chairman does that routinely. So I would expect that this would work in most circumstances. It's hard to draft rules that fit every circumstance, and we can always modify the rules if we need to.
Thank you.
Well, I think the other thing too is to keep in mind, because usually the biggest discussion we have is regarding the budget, and that's usually a public hearing. So these rules would not apply to that anyway. So we should be okay on that. The only concern I have, and I support these changes, the only concern that I have is, I don't know, the daytime meetings, we have reports from different organizations, DSS, the school, or whatever. So maybe, and then maybe it's in here, but maybe it bump that up before the actual committee reports and let people speak. And I think it's good to let people speak beforehand so they don't have to stay till the end and get somewhat frustrated. So that may be the order of business that we have. And I'll have to go back, let's see. Yep, you do have that public comment period before the, well,
It is on there
okay.
before the reports, and I brought
Okay.
that up at the last meeting, and I
Yeah.
know we discussed it. I didn't know if, by it not being changed here, if that was just going to be something that the chairman would do on that morning meeting, on the days we have reports.
Right.
Not every morning meeting, there are reports from the different, VDOT is usually here the first meeting of the month, so, it is,
Well, we can make that change on the fly.
right, yeah.
Well, we could do it right now. If Mr. Carter, are you only wanting to do that with respect to the morning meetings or both?
I think we have most of the reports, whether it's EDA, whether it's school, whether it's DSS, the extension office, whatever. They're usually in the morning meeting. So I would almost, and then there again, I see the agenda. I see the 3rd at 7 p.m. at 9 a.m. And actually, it doesn't really say So I guess it's page 4, call to order, pledge, adoption of agenda. This is public comment period. But it really doesn't say anything there about reports from outside agencies. It just goes to our report. So
It just says
probably if we left it like it is, we'd have the public comment period as item C, and then we have reports from the outside agencies just to follow that before that. So we probably don't really need to make any change there. I think we would probably be okay.
You can note that.
Now, the only other concern I have is on the evening meetings. If we start, best case scenario, we start at 7:10 with public presentations and we go for an hour, that's going to push back the public hearings. Now, they cannot start before 7:30, but they can always start later. And if somebody's there and we start at 7:15, it means the public hearing doesn't start till 8:15. The only concern I have there too is that sometimes we have applicants here with their engineer, their architect, outside people who are charging them, who knows, $150, $200 an hour just to sit there and listen to these other things. But I think we're better off letting the public speak, and if we have to, we push it back. And again, there may be situations where we don't even have much public comment, and we can still start the public hearings in a timely fashion. So
Well, I'll make a suggestion. If you're interested in the public hearing starting on time, then make it item C in both the morning and the afternoon and the evening meetings. I mean, that's the way to guarantee that the public hearing starts, because the call to order and adoption of the agenda takes 2 minutes. That's the way to guarantee that if that's a policy concern.
So what you're asking to do is just switch the process and put the reports prior to any of the public comment period? Is that
Well,
what
I
you're
think
saying?
we're off the reports
We're
now,
off the
Mr.
reports.
Chairman. I think we're just talking about the public hearings.
Right.
And, you know, Mr. Carter's point is you've got lawyers and engineers and expensive
Okay, I
people here.
understand. All
And
right.
typically, you know, Mr. Chairman, you change the order of the meeting to accommodate that. You know, and if that is a policy concern of the board, you can alleviate that by making item H in the morning meeting and item J in the evening meeting, item C in both. And then that guarantees that it will start on time, if that's something that you want to do. And you can do that tonight if you want to, or not.
well, normally we don't have many public hearings during the daytime meeting anyway, so it's almost a moot point.
Well, we'd have to change that to 7.
And the only concern would be with the public hearings at 7:30. Again, I think it's important to allow the public to speak at the beginning of the meeting, because I think it was, last meeting, where we had like 57 public hearings, I think.
Yeah.
So by the time all those get finished, it may be 9:30. And again, I think people want to go ahead and express their concerns, other than stay here for 2.5, 3 hours and do that. So we'll probably be okay leaving it as it is and just be attuned to if people are there with their attorneys, architects, whatever. So I'm just bringing it out for consideration, but I think we're probably okay just leaving it as it is and see how it works. We can always change it later, if that makes sense.
Seemed like to me I'd rather change it now. I mean, and bring the public hearings up, like you said, to item C.
I think that, but then the public hearing will be too early. So you're.
Well, no, the public hearing doesn't start before 7:30. So
Right,
even
but
if
if you
that,
make it item C on here, it's going to be earlier than 7:30.
Well,
Yeah.
you cannot
Yeah,
be
but I mean,
earlier
we
than
could-
7:30.
You could change the time if you wanted to do that. I think Mr. Daly has some things to say about this, too.
Okay.
Okay, let's go.
I believe the agenda as you have it written here, and when the chairman determines that it's 7:30 and we need to move into the public hearings, we move up into them when necessary. And on other days when we are moving along and about to close out the public comment section, we can go ahead and do that.
Just making it consistent is what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
But the last 2 times that we did it, that's what we did. When it came
I would
right
just do
around to
that, move it up
7:30 or
when
as
we
close
need
as we could, we moved it up.
Because you can suspend the public comment period
Exactly.
and go right to that. And if it's like only 3 or more people, we always give them that additional 10, 15 minutes and finish up. And I don't think it would be too much of a burden on the folks on the public hearing side.
Okay. So consensus is just leave it the way it is.
I like
Yeah.
it.
Any additional concerns? Thank you.
I'm passing down something, I think I've given it to, I'm okay going forward with this, but the other thing to consider, and I don't know, I think this is germane somewhat, because it came up, I think, in 2018, and I think Mr. Ham will agree that our rules are our rules, but they're not superseded by the ordinance itself. The ordinance takes precedence. And I gave you a copy that we talked about. And what this basically says, any orderly person present at the meeting of the Board of Supervisors may, upon recognition of the presiding officer, request permission to address the board, and the presiding officer may grant such request if he considers to be in the public interest, and he shall grant such request upon demand of any two supervisors. And this came back in 1975, I think, before they actually had public comment item on the agenda. And they at that time, there was somebody had a zoning issue and he wasn't allowed to speak, so that's when they adopted this, like I said, 1975 or whatever. But to me, this here would take precedence. So even with the rules we have, if two members said, we want to hear and let this person speak, we would have to allow that. And we wouldn't really have any time limit. So my suggestion, and I think the rules we have are a lot more lenient than what we have right now, because it allows anybody to speak without having to have two people. So just for consideration in the future, because I know we don't have much else to talk about, we might want to think about changing this ordinance and maybe codify our ordinance to reflect our rules, if that makes sense in the future. I don't think it has to be any, well, you can discuss it right now, but since I just kind of sprung it on you, and I apologize for the last minute, but this is just something that came up in 2018 by another gentleman came before us, and he cited this ordinance. So that's something we might want to think about changing. But so I just want to bring it up to your attention for tonight, just for future consideration.
I have recommended that 56-3 be abolished because it definitely is inconsistent with what our rules are. I appreciated you bringing it to my attention, and I have given that opinion that I think it would be best if it was gone.
And that's something we can talk about at a future work session, perhaps. I don't know, are we going to have any more work sessions? No, I'm sure. Other than that, I will make the motion. I move that the Board of Supervisors adopt the meeting policy and procedures as amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any additional discussion? Mr. Shiraki, could we get a roll call, please?
Mr. Fox?
Aye.
Ms. Cullors?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Ms. Oates?
Aye.
Mr. Carter?
Aye.
Now going into closed session, does someone want to read us in?
Yep, I will do this. I move the board enter into a closed meeting under the provisions of Section 2.2-3711A8 of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act for consultation with legal counsel for the provision of legal advice regarding the town's CARES Act agreement.
Oh, I'm sorry, because can we add to that and the release of liability regarding IT services?
Okay, and the release of liability regarding IT services.
Could I ask a question? Do we know about how long, I'm just thinking the people that are sitting out here to discuss the work session part, would it be better to do that first, to keep from holding them up first and then go closed session?
I don't expect to, I'm not going to talk for more than 5 minutes. I don't know how long you
Okay.
guys need to.
And I would think, too, this is part of the regular meeting,
It is.
so I appreciate that. And I know they appreciate it.
I tried, folks.
But there again, I think we can probably do fairly quickly. So you had the motion. Did you have a second?
Yeah, we need a
Okay.
second.
We are in need of a second.
I'll second it.
Any additional discussion?
Just one, maybe, and I don't know if we were prepared to discuss this tonight or not, but it's still EDA, town related, and maybe this covers it. But as far as the settlement agreement that we looked at before, would that be covered under this?
No. I don't have anything else to report since we last spoke, but it's not part of our current closed session motion.
Could that be added as far as a brief discussion on it?
If you like.
I would like, what do we have to do?
Okay. I move the board enter into a closed meeting to discuss everything with respect to the town.
Well, I don't think that works. So
Oh, well, yeah.
Good
I thought I'd
try.
make it easier.
Good
I
try.
was writing frantically,
I
too.
think we need a couple of minute recess to get the language that we used last time to go into the closed session with the town. And I wonder if I can ask our deputy clerk to pull up the last closed session motion that we did at the last meeting.
I think that was on the first, or last meeting,
Yes,
I
it was on
think.
the first.
So, didn't mean to make it complicated, I just think it's something maybe we need to discuss briefly and see where we are on that.
Nothing brief.
It can be.
5 minutes just turned into a little bit longer.
Well, from my perspective, you turned it into 10, but I don't know how long
Okay.
you guys want to talk about it.
Mr. Ham, is this the motion for A7 and A8, consultation with legal counsel for pertaining to actual probable litigation, and then regarding the town of Front Royal? And is it this?
Give me a second here.
Government in motion.
Yeah, so I would ask Mrs. Oates if you would amend your motion to include that the board enter into a closed meeting under the provisions of sections 2.2, 3711, A7, and A8 of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act for consultation with legal counsel pertaining to actual or probable litigation and the provision of legal advice regarding the Industrial Development Authority of the town of Front Royal and the county of Warren, Virginia, the EDA, the town of Front Royal, the EDA versus Jennifer McDonald et al., the town of Front Royal versus the EDA et al., and other potential claims and litigation related to other possible liabilities of the EDA and the recovery of EDA funds and assets.
What he said.
I make the motion as to, all right, I move the board enter into a closed meeting under the provisions of section 2.2-3711A7 and 8, right, of the Freedom of Information Act for consultation with legal counsel for the provision of legal advice regarding the town's CARES Act agreement and release of liability for providing information technology services, and then what you said.
I'll second that.
Any additional discussion? Mrs. Shiraki, roll call, please.
Mr. Carter?
Who?
You.
Oh, aye.
Ms. Oates?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Ms. Cullors?
Aye.
Mr. Fox?
We are in closed
Here
session.
you have the mask.
What he said.
I move that the board certifies to the best of each member's knowledge only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under section A.7 and 8 of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the meeting of the public body.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Roll calls, please, Mrs. Shiraki.
Mr. Fox?
Aye.
Ms. Cullors?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Ms. Oates?
Aye.
Mr. Carter?
Aye.
We're out of closed session. Now we're going to,
Do we have to make a motion to adjourn? I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
so be it.
I think we need to say all in favor.
I think so.
Yep. All in favor? Aye.
Aye. See you.
We all agree.
We all
Yep.
agree.
We all agree. We're done with the special meeting. Okay. Yep. No, we're here. Yeah, we're gonna stay here because of the technical issues.
Oh, let's see. We decided that we're going to move E up to A and discuss the broadband committees and the railroad transfer task force bylaws.
And Mr. Chairman, I have the most updated version of the Railroad Task Force bylaws with edits from Dr. Daly, yourself, and Mr. Carter.
You want to talk about the broadband first?
Oh, sorry.
You waving again, or?
Goodbye. Everybody's leaving me over here.
Yeah, can we do the broadband first? That's the longest.
I think broadband looks pretty good. I like the idea of
How did I get so many?
having
I'm
the
passing them
citizens involved in that, especially that one gentleman who was here, I think, from Ms. Culler's district. He seemed to be very knowledgeable. And I think it,
Can you say that again? I was trying to figure out why I'm getting all these papers and.
because this was an update on the railroad task force. But anyway, no, we were talking about the broadband. I said, I think the broadband agreement looks pretty good. And I like the tact that you're taking on that, because I think it's important to have a citizen from each district on there. And the gentleman that spoke here one day, I think from your district, he seemed very knowledgeable, and I imagine you're going to put him on there. And I've been trying to find people too, but I think that would be good, since broadband is an issue in all districts, some more than others, probably especially out your way, as far as having access to that. And I think it's very important with the schools, depending on what happens, to have access to that. So like I said, that gentleman you had, I hope you're going to put him on there, because he seemed really knowledgeable.
Since this is something I'm new with, how are citizen appointees usually done? Do we open it up and people apply? And then we
Yeah.
as a group?
Yeah.
Okay, I think that would be the best way then to do it. And I hope he does apply, but
And since
to
it's in,
not show special interest of any one person.
excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt, but like I say, in the, since we have it set in there, and we have some committees where we have one member from each district, planning commission, I think maybe we try the BZA, we try the Board of Zoning Appeal, well, it's the same thing, but the Builders Committee, we try to get somebody from each district if at all possible. But yeah, I would think that's a good idea to go ahead and put it out, and I guess we can put it online and advertise or whatever. And I don't know if you want to set a kind of a deadline. Do you have an idea of when you want to get this committee up and running?
I think the sooner the better, as far as between the VATI grants and whatever else, to get in on it as quickly as we can. So before it's all used up.
Would it be possible to be prepared, maybe our first meeting in October? Because I know we got a meeting next week, and I don't know if we've got another work session before then, but that would get everybody maybe 3 weeks to apply. And of course, I would also suggest, not only put the application process online in the paper, but then also go out and try to find people too that you may think's good. But we could start, maybe be ready to adopt whatever that date is in October, that first meeting. Does that make sense?
What we would propose for you, sir, is if these bylaws are acceptable, that they be on your agenda for adoption next week. And simultaneously, we will put out the notice of the positions available, so that you can then have those interested parties will have applied by the 1st of October.
Okay.
So that at the October meeting, then you can look at appointing people to the committee.
Would that give us enough time to have if we have it, we're only giving them 2 weeks to apply and get in here, so we could take a look at it.
Well, we could start, if by consensus this is agreeable, we will start soliciting applications this week,
Okay, good.
so that we get that extra week of time in there. And
Next week, we just approve it.
then next week you would approve this.
Okay.
And one change of the bylaws as we have here, we would like to suggest that Mr. Tim Grant be an additional advisor to the committee. He is the director of IT for the county schools. That he just be an advisory member so that he can assist you.
Question that I had, and maybe I overlooked it when reading this, is how often are they going to meet? A couple questions. How often do they plan to meet? And when do they report back to us, the Board of Supervisors?
Both will be under the committee and the board liaison. We would recommend that a member of the board be appointed to the committee, And that person will become the chair and then can drive the coordination between the board and the committee and make things that they're timely presentations to the board and so forth.
Okay, that sounds good.
So we would make that addition also.
I think that would be a good idea, and then I would leave it up to the committee to decide how often they want to meet and stuff like that, but I would possibly, pardon me?
First meeting, I'm sorry.
No, but yeah, the first meeting, they decide how often they want to meet. And I would almost suggest maybe, since we only have one meeting in December, maybe they can at least give us a preliminary report on how things are proceeding, but, you know, if a member of this board's on there, and I would suggest Ms. Cullors at this point, because she doesn't have anything else to do. But then again, in that meeting in December, which is probably going to be like the third Tuesday day meeting, that way we can get a report as far as the progress, and maybe it's just an organizational report, and then that way we have it, and then after that, maybe quarterly updates.
Staff will be here every Tuesday in December if the board wants to come.
Thank you.
I didn't have any other questions on this at all. Mrs. Cullors, I don't know if you wanted to be chair or not. I know that you originally threw your hat in the ring, I believe. I don't know what your time frame is and if you've got the
No,
ability to do it.
That's fine, I don't mind, and be glad to do it. And
I'll be happy to help you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
would it make sense to potentially have maybe one of the delegates from our area invited to participate? Because these guys are in tune with what is going on in Richmond with respect to broadband. And so perhaps Mike Weber or Todd Gilbert, or if Mr. Wiley is elected, I'm sure he'd be interested as well.
I think that would be great. The more people in positions to make a difference with moving this along, the better.
The only thing I would suggest on that would be not necessarily, and maybe you said advisory, but not necessarily make them a member of that committee, because they're going to be busy as all get out anyway. But they would be a
invite
good
them.
liaison
Right.
to the General Assembly,
Right.
and to keep posted on that, and they could come in periodically to say, here's what they're doing, here's what they're proposing, because I
Right.
think there's supposed to be some money available
Yep.
for broadband in rural areas, and how we go about getting that and everything.
And I've already got some of the broadband information already from past meetings that Mr. Daly and I went to. So we'll be able to get us up to speed relatively quickly. Now we
Okay.
just got to get the people involved.
Well, and if the delegates weren't ideal, then VACO has their own person who's also working specifically on the broadband issue.
Okay.
So perhaps that would be a better choice.
To work with Dean, or do you know that person, or should we just work with Dean?
Cheryl, we can find out from VACO.
Jeremy, I believe.
Jeremy, I
Jeremy.
believe is his name, yeah.
I
Jeremy
think you'll
Bennett.
find a lot of resources.
Yep, there's a lot of folks out there that are working on this.
Okay.
Now that they can Zoom, anybody can join your committee.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions on this broadband?
Oh, lots of questions, but none that, none I will
Okay.
go into tonight.
So that will be on the agenda next week with those couple of revisions.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Next is the bylaws for the Warren County Railroad Task Force.
So,
The only thing I thought about on that, and it's a little bit different for the broadband, and I think Ms. Oates has already had some conversation with the inland port, and I think the main area where we're having issues are, I think it's the boundary line, the railroad between, well, at the inland port and Fairgrounds Road and Rockland Road, and I think that's the boundary between Shenandoah and North River.
It is.
And my only thought was maybe you and Mr. Mabe could be part of that group. And I don't know, in this case, and of course the other areas you have too is along Happy Creek Road, Shenandoah Shores Road, and
Yep.
Mary Shady's
Mary
Lane.
Shady's Lane.
So that's a big problem too, and I don't think it's been quite as much of an issue out there, but The only thing that I'm aware of is that the railroads are basically going to do what the railroads want to do. When they were doing the improvements on Mary Shady's Lane, I think the only notice they gave was there's a sign saying this is going to be closed between Friday and whatever. I don't think they ever notified the county, VDOT, or EMS people or whatever. And I had a conversation with one of your constituents and you know, tried to see what they could do to alleviate it. But I know some years back where I live, I heard rumors that it was blocking my driveway, and I happened to be on the wrong side of the driveway, so I rode down to the Apple Mountain store, and sure enough, they were stopped right there. And I waited a few minutes, and here comes the engineer out with a sandwich bag and a styrofoam cup. And I reported to Mr. Stanley. He talked to the railroad, and they said, oh, we had a mechanical problem. I said, okay. So it was a couple weeks later, it was Easter. I was over in Winchester visiting relatives and came back. The same thing happened. So that was the time, and I'm not too adept at that now, but I took out my handy-dandy cell phone camera and took pictures of it and actually showed the guy. So that kind of alleviated that. But I'm just thinking that it's good to have the citizens on there, but it's more important, I think, to talk to the inland port. Right now, I think it's like a $5 million deficit because they ran into some issues with the topography out there. But even we got that $5 million tomorrow, you're still probably talking about 5 years before it gets built. So to me, the most important, and the history lesson, the railroads came about like in the 1850s trying to move commerce, and Congress just gave them carte blanche. They do anything, everything they want. They don't have to tell anybody. So to me, the better tack might be for you and Mr. May, along with maybe a member of staff, to start reaching out to Ben Klein, Senators Warner and Kane, and there again, maybe they can find that money, which could at least expedite it, and maybe they could put some leverage on the railroads to try to work things out a little bit better, because I just don't see where the citizens are going to have a lot of input. I mean, other than, well, they have input, and you can still gather that, document the times and dates when they do that, but, and there may be some, the other effort would be too with maybe Delegate Weber and Gilbert and Senator Obenchain and all those, because they may have some flexibility or input with the inland port, because right there, that's going to be the main thing. So I just, this to me is different from broadband, where the citizens can come into discussions and all, but this is going to have to be taken on a higher level to get things accomplished. And, you know, I wish you good luck.
Well, I will say that I've met with Norfolk Southern, and they've been most cooperative. We met with the inland port, Mr. Daly and I did, and that was very positive. So that, you know, we're hopeful that at the end of this project, there may be about $1 million, but that should be easily, or I don't want to say easily because $1 million is not anything easy, but they do think that in terms of grants, that there's a possibility to be able to fund the gap. The biggest issue that I see right now with the railroad is that we have blockages on a regular basis at Rockland, at Ashby Station, and at Fairground. And I just want to report, because this is a really good report, there was a blockage last week, and constituents and now have my cell phone number, and they're texting me, and they said, there's a blockage, it's been blocked for an hour. So I immediately called our representative at Norfolk Southern. He was back to me in 15 minutes with a report for the reason, and it was unblocked after that. So I reported back to the constituents, and they're okay if there's a reason and somebody tells them what's going on. The frustration is that you're sitting there for an hour and you have no idea and no one to call and no way to find out the circumstances. That's what's frustrating. So I reported back to the constituents, and I would like to report that the blockages have been fewer and fewer since, yes, considerably less since we initially spoke to them. So things are on the right path. We just need to come up with a solution. And the one person who's not on this list on these bylaws is Sheriff Butler, and he needs to be on this committee because he is the person who gets the calls most frequently at his office. So I would like to make sure that Sheriff Butler is a part of this committee.
We'll make him number 8, ma'am.
Yeah, I've also been in contact, just by the way, with Delegate Weber, and he has been helping me with connections with Norfolk Southern and with other people within Richmond. He's been very valuable, so I'd like to add that as well.
Okay, make that 9.
So you still want citizens on there? You just want to kind of make it you and Walt and Sheriff Butler? And, because it seems like you all are making some headway, and I'm pleased and impressed by that.
Yep.
But I just don't know if it would be better just for you guys to kind of do this along with input from different people.
Would it be of any value to have a certain amount of citizens as an alert that the railroad's blocked? That you're getting emails?
That's what we're working on. So right now, the biggest issue, so it's going to be 5 years before
Right.
that flyover is done.
Right.
That's a given. So the biggest issue within our community at this point in time is how do we notify citizens who when there is a blockage, and I've talked to them about, electronic signage. Sheriff Butler and I have talked about that. But that would only help the people on 522 who are going to make a turn onto one of these roads. The people who live there or playing golf there have no way of knowing that railroad crossing is blocked until they get there. So we've talked about potentially an app. Everybody else has apps. You get alerts from Richmond if there's a child missing. You get so could there not be some app that people could sign up for that could let them know? But that's a big idea, just to let you know. That's a real big idea. And we haven't talked about the details of even if that's possible yet. But those are the kinds of ideas that are floating around. So citizens' involvement could assist with the solutions. So that would be my only comment there.
So you want to put this on the second meeting or next week as far as the final outcome of
Intending
this?
to make these adjustments and then put it on at the next meeting.
Okay.
And Mrs. Oates, you're going to be the chairman?
Yes, Mrs. Oates has agreed. Mr. Daly asked me if I would consider that, and I said yes.
And I'll be happy to be on that with you.
Yep, glad you can be a part of it.
Mr. Butler?
I'll be more than happy to.
All right, thank
I
you.
did have a question about, why can't we put up a temporary camera that will go and feed into my dispatch? And so my dispatchers will have 24-hour coverage of the railroad tracks. Then we can get it out faster to the public by some means of signs by programming. Even if we put them out, it'd be a lot faster than waiting for a resident to come in, then a deputy to go respond to it. You're talking 15, 20, 30 minutes. It's already been sitting. Where if our dispatchers see it through the camera, which a camera we can use with a cell phone, I'm saying $300 or $400 for a camera we put on a pole.
Those are the kinds of
Yeah.
solutions we need to investigate.
Yep.
Yeah, can you work up
Well,
some?
we've already been looking into it. About 9 months ago, I started looking into that. For the nice movable ones that are self-generated, obviously, that VDOT has, we're looking at spending about $40,000, $50,000 for a pole cam.
No.
We don't want to do that. I'm trying to find a less expensive stopgate for it for now, like we look for auxiliary emergency routes. Like the Atwood Farm, the last I was at, Mr. Carter was talking about, they literally got no notification. Their driveway was blocked at 6 a.m. in the morning and could not get back into their home until 9 p.m. because I sat there for about 7 hours back and forth with it. Now that concerns me because I have many homes on Shenandoah Shore, Mary Shady Lane, and all through there that if we have rescue problems, the only way I can get in there is if I can get through the farm, Atwood's farm, if that area is open. I'd have to cut through his farm, cut through an emergency access, cut through the other farm. There's got to be a way we can get emergency access. It wouldn't cost as much money just for now because this overpass, it's not going to happen for 5-7 years. So when someone dies, because we can't get to them, now we got a problem. And Mr. Carter's right. the railroad's they got all the power in the world, and we really don't have any right now.
I think those are good points. I think those are things that Ms. Oates and Mr. May will discuss, and look forward to your
Yep,
valuable input. So,
yep, we're going to work on it.
sounds good.
Mrs. Shiraki, you're going to get this on the agenda for,
Yes, with the amendments as noted.
thank you. Any other questions, concerns on this?
Now, Mr. May, I'd mentioned to you before I need to leave, if that's okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Next is our introduction of the new director for the Warren County Department of Social Services and program overall of the departments, Mr. Rivas and Mr. Marks.
Wait, I'm all tangled.
All tangled up. are you?
I am all tangled up. Good evening, everybody. It is my pleasure to introduce you to John Mars. He is the new Director of Social Services. He comes to us from New Kent County. John went to school at Texas TCU, from my old stomping grounds, and he finished his degree at Mary Baldwin. He has been in social services for 13 years, and he's been a director for the last 6 years. And so we're pleased. I took him around this morning, introduced him to all the staff, and they're excited about him being there, and we're excited about him being there. So I think he's going to be a great addition to the community. Want to say anything? Sure. Go ahead.
Welcome, John.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. My wife's family is from Warren County. They've been here for generations, and this is an excellent opportunity for me to be able to bring her home. And I'm excited for the opportunity. I've loved the staff that I've met so far. We've got a wonderful staff, and I look forward to working with all of you. So thank you. And if you ever have any questions, we're there to help. So,
Welcome to our community.
thank you.
Yes. So, Ms. Cullors, you asked for an explanation about our fundings, though. I have a presentation, and Dwayne's going to put it up for me. There we go. So this is just an overview of our funding and the different funding streams that we have. I know a lot of the departments have grants, but these are pretty fixed, the funding streams that we have. So from the federal government, we get about 41%. This is on our overall budget. The state revenue is about 29%, and the local match required is 30%. Next slide. And it's just a pie chart just to kind of show you how it looks. The federal government certainly pays the bulk of it, and the state and the locality are about the same. Next slide. Where it changes is where, and I was trying to explain that the other day, administration, the locality picks up more of the cost. And so it's about 41% federal money, state money is about 20%, and 39% is the locality. But it mostly affects the administrative costs. So the salaries, when I was talking about salaries, that's what I meant, is the state doesn't have as much of a stake in the salaries as the locality. And we're considered county employees. So it makes a difference. The departments are, state supervised, locally administered. So, and for every dollar spent on administration, the county receives about 60 cents in reimbursement, which would follow along with, with increases, the reimbursement would go along with that. So you get some reimbursement if you increased our salaries. Next slide. So the total amount spent on social services in the locality is about $62 million, 62.1, and Warren County's share of that is $1.7 million. As a general rule, for every dollar spent locally, the locality receives about 74 cents in reimbursement. Next one. Now this is our program budget. So you're seeing the match rates. So if you look at family preservation, bought this little thing, see if it works. I'm not close enough. Okay. So family preservation, in order to get that money, the locality has to put up 15.5% to get the local match in order to draw down that money from the state. Child welfare, abuse, and support services, 15.5% local match. Adult services, there's a 20% local match. Safe and stable families, 15.5. View purchase of services, that's the view purchase of services is the money that we spend on families that are trying to get off welfare and go to work. Emily's getting on me. So that's a really important part of our budget because that's where we get people off welfare and into the workforce. So we can pay for training, we can pay for transportation, we can pay for tools, just about anything that furthers someone's efforts to go to work and get into the workforce and be able to be self-sufficient. Then adult protective services, you've got a 15.5%, and then for the 4E training grant is 43%, and that goes along with the locality gets more administrative training would be an administrative cost, and that's why but it's only $800. So overall for programs, these programs that you see listed here, the match rate overall is about 4%. Yes, sir.
Is that like the $800 training grant?
Yeah.
Is that all there is? I mean, or can you apply for more?
You can, if we turn in our budget and we ask for $1,000 for training, we can draw down more money based on what we're budgeted for here. But the state has a very specific and frankly outdated formula for determining how much localities get reimbursed. And they are currently reviewing that, and they're looking at redoing the whole formula. The problem is, nobody who wrote it is around anymore. And so nobody knows why we have it the way we have it. They just know that that's what you do. And localities are mostly comfortable with that because they know what to expect. They know what they're going to get from year to year to year. If you start changing the formula, then you start changing the reimbursements. When you do that, you get winners and losers. And your bigger localities start drawing down more money, leaving less for your smaller localities. Our locality like Warren County, we're going to get stuck in the middle. We're not big, we're not small. And so there's a chance that we could start losing some of the reimbursement from the state as they start changing the formula. So we need to be very sure that we're advocating, and VACO is a very good organization to be advocating for that, because you want to make sure that the reimbursement that your localities are getting remains consistent. You know very well, it's so hard to budget if you don't know what your budget's going to be. If you don't know what the bottom line is, you don't know what to allocate for what programs. And so, yeah, we could tweak here and there and move one budget line to the next and ask for more in this budget line and less in that budget line. But the overall amount we get from the state remains fairly consistent as long as the formula that they're using remains consistent. That kind of sort of answer your question?
Yeah, it kind of does, but I'm still confused. If you see a need and you want to go from $800 to $8,000, is there a possibility of that happening? I mean, maybe that's way out of the realm of things, but if you know that there's a problem,
yes,
and you want to help solve it, asking for money should not be an issue. But it sounds like to me that it is.
It is.
It is, because we could allocate more money to that budget line, but we'd really have to take it and move it from another budget line into that, because the amount you're going to get from the state is going to be fairly consistent.
Okay.
We can move it around, but we're not going to get that state federal share necessarily.
Do you use
over
every
what we
dollar
got.
that you get from your grants?
Generally, yes, sir.
This $800, is that $800 to train for a full year for your entire staff?
No,
Or
ma'am,
is
that's
that
a
per
specific
individual?
training line for 4E funding. 4E funding is
Okay.
basically foster parents?
Title IV is federal reimbursement for foster care. If you have kids coming into foster care, you want to get them, if at all possible, qualify for 4A funding because you get 100% reimbursement rate from the federal government. And 4A really depends on the family circumstances, the 6 months prior to when the child comes into foster care. That's an eligibility question.
So we really jumped on one that opened up a can of worms for us.
Yeah, but you want to make sure that you're training your staff to properly pursue the 4E, because if you declare somebody's 4E eligible and they're not, you're going to have to repay that money.
Okay, well, I just thought that was totally unrealistic of
Right,
any.
that's not our, that's just the 4E budget.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and from CPMT, we try to determine 4E eligibility first, because that's 100% federal money, and then we use the CSA funds, and then if neither one of those pots can be used, then we have to use sometimes local-only money, but that's rare.
Who determines the formula? Who makes up the formula that you go by?
The last person I knew at the state level who knew what the formula was J.R. Simpson. He was one of the
Finance directors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chief Financial Director of Social Services. He retired a couple of years ago, and the formula is still in place, but now they just plug the numbers in. They had a lot of turnover at the state level. Mike Gump, who was also in charge of finances at the state, he retired last year as well. So now we have new people in these places, and the state board of social services is starting to look at, okay, why do we do the things that we do? Why is just because we've always done it that way, does that mean it's right? But nobody really has an answer. I ask the commissioner all the time, I said, who came up with these numbers and why are we using these numbers? Well, nobody can answer that question. You often get the answer, it's complicated. Well, yeah, it is. It's very complicated. But, we have to advocate to make sure that we're getting the fair share for Warren County.
Yeah, then that was the question. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. And Johnsbury spends a lot of time with the League of Social Services Executives, and those are the people the state goes to find out what's going on in the localities. So they have personnel committees. And just recently, they changed one of the rules in the personnel committee to allow us to hire social workers that have an education degree. Before, we couldn't hire teachers, which was ridiculous because they have a wonderful background working with children, which is what most of our social workers do. And so we had to exclude them. We had to screen them out. Now they've allowed us to use education degrees as part of the mandate of the kind of degrees that you have to become a social worker. So that opened up a whole new avenue for us, because sometimes we get 2 or 3 applications for our positions. And so we don't have a huge pool. So when you exclude a whole bunch of people that live here locally who maybe don't want to be in the classroom anymore, that really limits the pool that we can draw from. And since the other localities around us pay more, we're oftentimes the training ground. So we hire them. It takes about a year for a social worker to get all the training that they need, and then they go to Frederick County and Winchester.
So in order, if I were a teacher and I wanted to change to go into social, I could apply and I would get
You would get
on-the-job training for the social work part?
Yes, ma'am.
Without having to go to college and get a degree in that?
We look for human services degrees now. It's not necessarily a social work degree. So a lot of things, psychology degrees, sociology degrees. The state is expanding the pool a little bit more. And I think the next slide really kind of illustrates what we're up against when we are looking to bring in services workers.
One more. There you go. That was the comparison I was talking to you about the last time I came before you.
And these are Warren County.
These are Warren
numbers.
County numbers.
So,
And that's a start, that 66.5 is a starting salary in the schools. And they do the same job that my girls do, my ladies and gentlemen, because we have hired some men lately. So same degree requirements. My staff has to do on-call, which is every night and all weekend and all holidays. And the school social workers don't have to do that, and they work fewer days than my folks do also. So it's just really hard. They are working so hard. We were talking to them today. They are so stressed. One of my CPS workers has 40 investigations open. 40. She's only been there a year, and she is overwhelmed. So there's just, we got to figure out what to do and how to hire more people. We've got an advertisement out right now for 3 people. Somebody coming on in mid-month that has some experience, which is great. And we've got 3 positions. We've got advertised now, and we're waiting on applications for those to come in. But it's a constant change, and I know Sheriff has it. Fire and Rescue has it. It's just a problem. But
Can you tell me what I apologize, were you?
I was just going to ask a question, but you go ahead.
What is the breakdown between that $37,650 of what is compensated by the locality, us, and either is it just states or you said state and federal pays towards, or just does the state and the locality pay towards their salary?
If you look back to the one of the earlier slides where it talked about the administration, that's where
The
our
salaries
staff and
are.
operations comes out of. So you get about 60 cents back on the dollar. So of that $37,000, almost 2/3 of it technically is money that's coming from the state. However, because we're state supervised, locally administered, Warren County cuts the check and pays that $37,000, and then you get reimbursed on the back end about 60% of that.
So the issue becomes, ma'am, is the fact that the state has a cap on what we're going to get. And we can have 10 more positions as long as they're locally funded.
Correct,
And as long
because
as
we're only going
that's
to get,
where the issue is the state caps how much money we're going to get.
Is that based on population?
I think that's one of the things it's based on. It's based on caseloads. It's based on a lot of different things. And to give you a little bit of perspective, Beth talked earlier that our CPS worker has 40 active cases. Naturally,
Yeah, that's
accepted
crazy.
standards are 15 per caseload. And we have workers who have more than double what they're supposed to be having because it's so intensive. And when it comes to CPS, you're talking about the safety of children
Right.
at that point in time. And so if you have 40 cases, you have 25, 26 working days in a month. You have less than a day to spend on investigations of alleged abuse or neglect.
And we're seeing serious injuries to children.
how many
No.
CPS workers do you currently have?
2.
2. How many, in the perfect world, with the consideration of population or whatever the state uses, should we have?
They were unclear because the other caseworker really didn't know how many cases she had. But in order to get to about 15, I'd say we need about 5.
5.
5. So
5 is our target.
2 vacancies or 3 vacancies?
3 vacancies right now.
So we have 3 positions we are filling.
Filling.
Well,
and that will get you where,
That will make it bearable.
However, what we also have to keep in mind too is in an ideal world, you don't send a worker out until they're fully trained.
right.
And that would take a year. So unless you can attract somebody with those training and experience to come in, you're looking a year down the road before you're up and running fully, like it should be. The worker we talked to this morning, she's just barely been there a year. She has 40 cases. How are you going to attract more experienced people? Well, A, you make it a really good place to work.
And we're working on that.
Because while money is great, money isn't everything.
But if it's a
However-
horrible work environment, it's not worth the money.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there such a thing? Okay, so I know like nationally there was a shortage of nurses. And so the nursing community decided to do contractors, right? They contracted those people as opposed to hiring overhead. Is there anything like that in the social service? I mean, are there contractors who could come in and augment your staff until you could get training?
You can hire what we call emergency temporary workers,
Okay.
which, if you can find one, who's maybe willing to come out of retirement or has switched jobs and is looking to do something short term, great. The odds of finding that, though, when everybody's looking for it, we evolve all the way back to our argument of how much you're going to pay them to make it worth their time as well. Now, some of the universities, there are 5 universities in Virginia who participate in a stipend program,
Right.
where kids get stipends to take social work courses. They actually take some social services trainings while they're in school. And so when they come out of school, they've already got some of the trainings under their belt. And they have to stay with you for a year, or they have to repay the stipend. We have one.
We have one
that came out
now.
of Radford University. Back in New Kent, I hired a couple of them out of Radford University. They have a leg up on other new workers, but they're still new workers.
And we're talking about somebody fresh out of college dealing with life situations that they
Aren't prepared for.
can't even imagine.
Is there any thought along the line, since they've opened it up to teachers, to open it up to nurses?
Yeah, it all depends on what the degree is.
So it doesn't have to be just teaching? If
No,
it's,
it
if
can
it's
be.
in.
It can be psychology, it can be sociology, it can be social work, it can be
Really,
in
unless you.
I'm
human-
just thinking with COVID, there might be a lot of nurses that decide social work looks really good.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
all depends, you know, a phys ed major, I probably couldn't get qualified in.
Right.
But I was a history major in college. And once I got to do anything, well, not much, but it's human services type area.
That's what we're looking, that's what the state requires.
Right.
You told us last time that you were short about 8 people total.
On both sides,
Yeah, both
benefits
sides,
and,
yeah. Is
yes.
that still true? I mean, I know it is only from last week, but.
yeah. We've got somebody coming on mid-month, a young man who has some experience. He's going to be in ongoing foster care. So, you know, just because somebody has experience, you still have to look at the fit for the job. And some people are very well suited to CPS investigations, and some people are better in the follow-up. So we have one worker that maybe brings your child, takes your child away from you. Well, then you turn right around and start to develop a relationship to try to get that child back. Well, the same person doing both those jobs is really tough. So we try to keep it separate, but we're not able to do that now because we don't have enough people to keep that separate. So more staff will definitely, when we fill those positions and if people stay, but, you know, both John and I have experienced somebody shows up and leaves at lunch and you never see him again, and you never know why.
The problem is most people don't know what they're getting into when you start working CPS. You're like, oh, I'm going to help children, that's great. But then when you start seeing what you see, it's very traumatic.
Especially for these young kids coming out of school.
How many,
You know, we
adult
find them
protective-
crying underneath their desk. It's that bad some days. It's a hard job.
Your adult protective services, how many do you have?
Right now, we
work with
have
that?
3. Have a senior worker. She left us, went to another locality and came back, and she does a great job. And we have 2 other workers that are working on adult
You know,
services.
Is that adequate?
I think right now it's fine. You know, the baby boomers, all of us are getting older, and so there's more people that need our services, but we're able to hold our own in APS. We're doing fine in APS.
How
And some
about
people
your,
prefer that to working with the children.
Okay. What about your foster care? Do you have people overlapping and doing, 2, or do you have people designated for foster care?
Generally, you need to have dedicated staff to foster care because the child will, sometimes the only constant in their life is the worker, because they often move from placement to placement, especially children with a lot of serious behavior problems, and a lot of kids that are in institutional settings where they have to be, because they have mental health issues or danger to themselves or others kind of issues. And so the worker is the one person. So we try as we may, we try to keep those, you know, people constant so the child has something constant. But, you know, even our foster parents are complaining. You know, I've had 4 workers I've been a foster parent a year, and I've had 4 different workers to try to deal with. And it's a personal relationship that you develop with the foster parents, with the birth parents, and with the children. And so the more we can keep those consistent, the better it is for everybody.
So how many people do you have on staff that work just with foster care?
Foster care, 2, 3.
And that's not adequate, but it's working, or?
Well,
it's
you have to
adequate?
visit every child every month, and they're not all in Warren County, so
No.
they're driving all over the state to see the kids. And then they have to do foster care plans, they have to go to court, they have to file the stuff with the court. So there's a lot to it, and plus all the documentation, plus they have to go to the FAP team to present the child's needs and do all the paperwork that goes with that, which is extensive. So there's,
And
you
they
know, there's a lot to it.
often, from my experience, go pick the child up, bring them to the FAP meeting, then take them back.
Yeah.
Okay.
And ideally, foster care the goal is to return the child home. We don't want to go through adoption. One day in foster care is traumatic, and it's going to leave an indelible mark on the child. So your foster care workers are not only working with the child and working with the school and working with the courts, they have to be working with the parents.
The birth parents also.
To work on whatever issue caused the situation to evolve into foster care in the first place. And that's where the relationship comes in, and that's where the trust between the worker and the parents, because the parents really have to know we're working in their best interest, and after you've taken their child from them, how much are they really going to trust that you're working in their best interest? And so retaining staff, especially in foster care, is so vital to the success of children in foster care.
And then we have timelines that we have to meet. You know, the federal government sets up timelines. So if you don't have a child back in their home, then you have a certain amount of time to get them a permanent place to live. So we got to move quickly to terminate parental rights and get that child available for adoption, and to look for adoptive homes for those children. So the workers are doing all that work also.
The same foster staff takes care of the adoption issues as well? So how many regular office staff, and I don't mean regular in any condescending way, but your administrative assistants or office manager, what do you have? I'm just trying to get an overall of your staffing.
In the administrative area, there would be the director, and then a person that does finances, HR, what else? Personnel, the payroll, the budget. There's one person that does that. Then we have a lady we just hired who's going to learn that piece too, so we'll have a backup, because if anything happens to Mickey, nobody knows what to do. So she keeps the motion going. So we just hired somebody to learn that program, and she also does all of our IT support. Getting people, she spent 2 weeks trying to get me an email account from the state and get all my security clearances in place so that I could get the information I need. She's been working on John's for over a week and a half just to get him what he needs to do his job. It's all very complicated and slow. So she's dealing with the phones, she's dealing with the email accounts, she's dealing with the computer, the programs that we have from the state to do our job, which are complicated. For months, we've been working with a state program that we scan our documents. We have electronic case records, we scan our documents. That hasn't been working for months. And so people go to do their work and they can't get to the documents they need to. The state's been working on that. So a lot of work between the state and that position. And then our community liaison, Michelle Smeltzer, that was here last time and got an award for the work she did with the thermal shelter. She's in the administrative area. And we do have an assistant director. So that's the administrative staff. Then on the benefits side, there's 2 supervisors and about 11 workers. And then on the services side, you've got, and there's no support staff in benefits. They do everything for themselves. And then the services staff has 1 support person. It's called Human Services Aide. She does a lot of the typing into the system. The workers will dictate and then give them and she'll do the transcription into the system, because every single move they make has to be documented in a system, or it hasn't happened. You know, the case records have to be extensive. All the visits have to be documented. All the plans have to be documented. All the court appearances have to be documented. All your contacts with everybody involved in the case, from the parents to the children to the foster parents to doctors, teachers, attorneys, all that has to be documented in a system for both child welfare and adult services. So they spend an awful lot of time, you know, completing this stuff in those systems. So there's about 41 people all told.
Wow.
And so we've got 8 to 9 social workers, and then I've got a support staff, so I have receptionists, people that answer the phone, and we get 1,200 calls a month. And we get 800 people in the front door. So the receptionist staff is busy, plus we have online applications that have to be registered and researched and set up in the system, documents. We pull reports from Social Security, from Virginia Employment Commission, from several federal systems.
DCSA.
Yeah, the support enforcement, we get all that third-party information so we can verify that against what the client tells us. So we have independent ways to verify money and Social Security payments, unemployment payments. We have systems that we can check and see if somebody's been working. So all those reports have to be pulled on every single individual in the case, and they're all in a different system. So there's just a lot of stuff that goes along with the
Now,
with the
with
job.
that, do you have much staff turnover with that side?
With
of-
benefits, it's the same salary difference between us and the other localities. But it's a little more stable than it is on the social work side, because you don't have that constant tension and constant work and the 40 cases as opposed to 15. The caseloads across the state are much more balanced in the benefit side. So you don't have that intense stress that you have on the social work side.
The advantages you have in the benefits, you know, there's no degree requirement
Yeah.
for that position. And your training time generally would be a lot less.
And you can train people on specific programs, like we have workers that deal with nothing but nursing home applications and the people that are in nursing homes, and somebody that deals with disability clients, and somebody that deals with women and children that are getting cash payments and we're trying to get them back to work. So that's a specialized. So you don't have to train them on every single program for everything, because we can specialize to some extent.
There are 27 different kinds of Medicaid out there.
Wow.
It's a lot.
Thank you for all you do.
so much.
I have one question, if you will, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
If you received more increased funding from the county, would that prompt increased funding from the state and the federal? Is that the way that is that a fine?
It could.
It could.
Because what the state also looks at, and especially what they're starting to look at now, is how much skin in the game does the locality have. And your more successful localities have more of an input from their locality and rely less on the state. So yeah, you could in turn get more income. Dollar for dollar.
And that would be a huge benefit for the county then, wouldn't it?
I spent one day with the staff, and I could tell you the impact it would have on them would be tremendous. And a motivated staff is far better for your community. And one of the slides we had showed that social services generates about $62 million worth of economic activity in Warren County alone. Medicaid is the bulk of that. SNAP is another big part of it. And so the money being spent in the grocery stores and the money being spent in the doctor's offices and the
Dentist's
hospitals,
office, everything.
all taxable money that comes back to the community. So the more you invest in your social services, the more successful we are The mission of Virginia Department of Social Services is to help people triumph over poverty. And so the more people you get into the workforce and the more people that you have that support for that then become self-sufficient, because that's our goal with everything we do, the more economic viability you get, the stronger your community gets. So the more you, it's like anything else, the more you invest in it, the stronger it becomes and the more return you get back from it.
And the better job people can do. They're not overwhelmed. If you have a decent-sized caseload and you're not on call every other night and working most of the night and then working again the next day, then you get more quality work, you get more investment, you get more time with the clients, time with the kids, time with the families. It's just all there.
So you must remind us of this at budget time.
No problem.
Nope.
I have one final question.
Yes, sir.
I know that we're keeping on the line, but
That's okay. I'm happy that you're interested.
it's a subjective answer. What is your success rate?
It depends on what program you're talking about. If you're talking about SNAP program, they used to do a thing called SNAP participation rate. And the goal was to get 80% of the people who are eligible for SNAP on SNAP. They really don't follow that anymore, but they should.
Shouldn't you be also thinking about how many you're getting off of SNAP?
Yeah, very much so. The VIEW program, the Virginia Initiative for Employment and Education and Work, used to be called welfare. We don't call it that anymore. It's TANF, Temporary Assistance for Needy Family. Temporary is the goal. By the time you're done with your 24 months being on TANF in the work program, you should be more educated, you should be more employable, you should have if not a degree, you're going to have a certification in something. And so, yeah, we look at how many people come back through the TANF program. And if you look at the TANF numbers over the years, they've steadily declined ever since they put the work requirement in there. It's because they're getting educated, it's because they're getting trained, it's because they're getting jobs. And then, the old cycle of it was good enough for grandma, it was good enough for my mom, it's good enough for me, it's good enough for my kids. No, it's not. It's not good enough for you. You deserve more. Your kids deserve more. You want more for them. And so it's the motivating part of what we do. The SNAP program now has an employment and training part of it. If you are a single adult with no kids, you have to do a work activity in order to keep your SNAP or you're going to lose your SNAP. And so the more education we're giving them, the more training we're giving them, the more employable they become. You go from your $9 an hour jobs to your $12, to your $15, and so on. All of us started out minimum wage. It was $3.35. My first job, I made $3.35 an hour.
$2.25.
Hopefully,
$1.36.
you don't stay there. Hopefully, you use that experience to get a little bit better job. You use that experience to get a little bit better job. And so part of what we do is try to help our clients and our citizens understand that this is the progression that we're looking for, and we surround you with supportive services.
We help pay for daycare. That's the big deal. The problem is if you have a minimum wage job and you've got kids, you can't pay daycare and work because you can't afford it. You don't get enough hours, you don't get enough pay. So a lot of those women have to stay home because it's cheaper to stay home than it is to work. So daycare is one of our biggest supports that we do for the women that are on public assistance so that they can get those years in, that experience in. Back in the day when we first started Welfare to Work, I was seeing women who had never seen anybody in their household go to work. They didn't know how to fill out an application. They didn't know how to dress. They didn't know how to behave. They didn't know what punctuality was. Well, we've come a long way since then. But that was what I was dealing with in the 70s and the 80s. When they first started these programs. Now, we get people that have not gotten that generational thinking about public assistance, and it's time limited. The most you can get is 60 months for your entire lifetime. And if you have another child while you're on public assistance, that child is never eligible for benefits. So they put a lot of things in place to keep it from being just generation after generation. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
We appreciate your interest very much. Ms. Cullors, I thought about you yesterday when I was on the river, tubing for my very first time ever. And I just want you to know I have bruises in some very unusual places.
Did you come by to the bridge in Bentonville?
Yes, yes, we
Then you
did.
came by my house.
Oh, it was exciting with my grandchildren, very exciting.
Well, it was a beautiful weekend to be on it, and the river cooperated by getting to a safe level there.
It did, it was great.
Again, thank you.
You're very welcome.
She's been waiting for so long.
Ms. Tobin, election 2020 preparations. Thank you for waiting, Ms. Tobin.
And bless your heart, I tried, Carol.
It's okay. It's been a long week. It's going to get longer. But you recall in August, you all voted to, we had the minimum standards for cybersecurity that the state, the General Assembly enacted, and the state had to write a plan. And part of that plan was us to do a self-assessment. And with that, we had the help of Tim Grant, and he decided that they didn't have all of the resources to put in place to actually meet the standards that were required with the minimum standards. And therefore, it was recommended that we get outsourced to a company that could provide some of the standards that we need to meet. So you all asked that we invite the company, which is Assura, and it's my pleasure to say that tonight that their Chief Executive Officer is here with us, Karen Cole, and she's going to kind of explain what their company's going to do for us. Ms. Cole?
I have to tell you, this is like going to the Oscars for me. With the pandemic, I don't think I've been out of the Henrico area in like 6 months. So this is very exciting. Thank you all for having me this evening. I'm certainly not going to go through 3 pages of documentation, but I did want to provide you some background information. Cybersecurity, it's a pretty charged subject, right? And so what I'd like to talk to you about this evening is really where we are with elections, where we're going, and sort of some of the touch points into the overall county as a whole. So with respect to our upcoming election, it is quite a target for threat actors. And over the past several months, we've seen an increase from foreign agents from Russia, China, and Iran. And last week we saw some new actors that we had not seen with Cuba and North Korea and Saudi Arabia. So those types of attacks on elections, some people think, okay, well, that might be for larger localities. No. 100 years ago, I think when I started out in cybersecurity, it was very much, the larger targets, right? Now it's indiscriminate. And so localities are a rich target, not just from where elections are executed, but the treasure trove of confidential information that is maintained at the locality from all levels of government. So when working with our clients, we're starting out with election protection because we want to definitely make sure that you all are ready and protected in preparation for this election. That's not to say that you don't already have cybersecurity protections in place, but it's important as board members that you understand that cybersecurity is a moving target. And it's always at the forefront of leadership because at the end of the day, cybersecurity is not a technology issue. Cybersecurity is a people issue. Majority of data breaches happen because of human behavior, not because of technology. So as we start with Carol and her team, we will be working in 2 different areas. One will be in what we call the technology space, where we're going to be taking a look and continuing to lock down the poll books, emails, things like that to make sure that things are shored up before the election, but also what we call on the governance, risk, and compliance side, which is that program management piece, right? So that management of cybersecurity from the election standpoint. However, this is a starting point, and one of the things that I'm excited to see, and I thank Mr. Daly, as we've moved forward with this contract, is that he does recognize the importance of cyber, and that this becomes a effort that supports everything that you do, and it ties to your strategic plan. So now, as earlier as you were talking about broadband, right? As you're talking about major initiatives and swapping out systems and new capabilities. Well, cybersecurity is a piece of that, because in every major technological initiative, there's also people out there that are threatening to take that away. So there's a balance out there. But we are going to start off with elections. Did want to make sure that we talk about the bigger picture. One of the things as we start, we will be building out a roadmap, and that roadmap will be the 1 to 3 year plan for elections to make sure that not only are we meeting the requirements of the Commonwealth of Virginia, but that it's right-sized for her department. Because at the end of the day, it does you no good. I could put, my folks can put a beautiful plan in place that will sit there and grow dust, and that's not going to be of any value to you. So the last thing that I'd like to leave you with, and I'll answer any questions that you have, is a couple of different thoughts. One, again, this is not going to be an IT issue, and this is going to be an overall people issue, and that starts from the highest form of local government, which means you all. And so you will see us again, and we will bring you a policy, and we will talk to you about this, and we will talk to you about the support that we need in moving forward and protecting, not just starting with elections, but any additional threats that may be identified for the county or the school systems or things like that, because at the end of the day, you all are sharing a significant amount of data and resources. You all deserve to be protected. Your citizens and stakeholders deserve to be protected. So as we move forward, I just personally wanted to come today, to first and foremost, thank you for the opportunity for Assura to help you all with this initiative. And it also helps to get out of the greater Richmond area once every 6 months. So with that, I just wanted to take a moment. I know that it's been a long day for you all, but to answer any questions that you may have.
I have questions. So when you say that you are not shoring up more of the IT, but you're shoring up more of the people, so is that my understanding is that you are going to put into place protocols and protections that when somebody gets up and leaves their desk, that they make sure that their computer is, back into password mode?
We actually do both.
Right.
So yeah, it will be the technology, but it will also be, like you said, those management controls, or what we call management controls, that are rules about how you operate. And again, we're contracted for elections, but there's many things that we'll be putting in place that can be utilized across the county. But yes, it is a marriage of both technical and management controls.
Okay, so are you writing policies like an ISSO would do, or risk management framework, that kind of, is that what you're doing?
I'm going to get teary because you're saying words that are really good. You're talking about ISO, the International Standards Organization,
yes.
And so the way that the Commonwealth works is the standards that they are pushing down are based upon a complementary framework called the National Institute of Standards and Technology.
NIST
800-53.
Yep.
So you all will be compliant with that. Those controls will be compliant. Part of those are policies and procedures. Part of those are supporting plans. One of the first things that we will work on will be what's called a cybersecurity incident response plan. And then with that, you'll have system and you'll have risk assessments. And some of those risks we're going to come and talk to you about in private session. Sorry. And you'll make decisions about those. But then also disaster recovery plans, things like that. So, so it's a number of things. And in fact, that's why I didn't want to bore you all. But if you are interested in what comes with this, and what that looks like as far as the plans and programs that are being put in place, how they meet the requirements of House Bill 2178, and then the technology in place, I wanted to provide that to you for reference.
Are you going to be doing certification and accreditation kinds of things? Is that are you guys going to be doing CNA? Okay.
Yeah, the Department of Elections, and in fact, NIST doesn't require that.
Okay.
However, you all as a locality go through a audit annually. And I'm not sure which auditing firm that you use, but generally, many of the ones that operate will take a look at certain cyber controls now as part of their overall comprehensive annual audit. And so if that's the case, then yes, they will hit some of those NIST-based controls, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you all have to have an annual certification unless you want to go that route, but it's definitely not necessary.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions?
I just have one, if you will, maybe from Ms. Tobin. But, over the years, we seem to have gone through a lot of different machines, voting machines. Do we have it down now where that we're confident that the right vote goes where it's supposed to go, and with the backup of the vote actually going into a machine to be counted?
I am going to let you
Are we
know that.
are we down to the final machine now?
Well, we've got a paper trail.
Yeah.
So the scanner reads the ballot, the digital scan, and it does the count. So we always have that paper trail as backup, and that's what the people want. So I would say that I think we're there.
We're finally there. Okay. Thank you. That's all I had.
Well, I'm not asking computer questions because I am not technology savvy. I bow to her expertise and she will get me there. But as far as your needs, I know Dr. Daly increased your staff, which I'm grateful for. I know you are, but.
Part-time and temporary, but right now it's still limited, for the needs that we have. Because they Okay. It's a little bit limited for the needs we have. We are seeing such historical numbers now that we haven't experienced before because of the no excuse in COVID. So we are experiencing numbers that we've not seen in any other election, which is, I'm glad to see people are wanting to vote. But it does take people to implement that and work that and get the ballots out and all that. So we'll have some volunteers that will
was
help
my
our
next
officers. Yes, of course you have to be sworn to do what we do. And so the reason I reach out to our officers, they're already sworn officers, and they'll volunteer to come in and help with that.
Okay, that was going to be my question.
When you say you have historical numbers, are those numbers that you're referencing absentee
Yes,
ballot request
yes.
for people who
Yes.
don't want to vote in person?
Yes,
Okay.
and we have like 10 days to come up to speed to make sure we're ready. We are already, because there was a lawsuit, we had a ballot change last Thursday. The order came through. We had a ballot change, so I had to go through that whole process again. So it meant delay in our getting our ballots as early as we probably would have, because they couldn't start printing until all of that was proofed and approved by both the county and the state, not just Warren County, all of the state. So the printers are eagerly, working very hard around the clock to get our ballots to us, which we haven't received yet. But once we do that, then the pressure will be on to get everything done that we need to do, which means a lot of long nights, long weekends, very long hours, and sometimes not enough people, but we're trying to get there. And of course, they added extra things to this past year because of COVID and the federal election and presidential, like the postage on the return envelopes and those kinds of things, which adds to the workload because it has to be postmarked. So we had to actually get stamps for that. So there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes, that some of the new laws that have come out, that they don't know how they go about implementing some of the things. So it does create a lot of volume for things that we have to oversee and make sure it gets done, and make sure we can implement all those laws that take effect.
how long does it take someone that, if they want to help by volunteering, to get sworn in?
Well, they have to first be appointed by the electoral board, and that's usually a pretty easy process that we can go through. But then they have to do they have to do an acceptance letter. We send out letters that they've been appointed. They have to do an acceptance letter, then they have to take their oath, and then there's training involved. So we try to do that closer to the elections so that they've got familiar training and they don't forget it before they actually can, use that training, so.
So if someone wanted to volunteer, they need to get in that process.
Right, and we do
Now,
have some
basically.
volunteers coming out, yes, and we're in that process right now. So if you know anyone, certainly send them our way.
Okay.
Additional questions? Thank you, Ms. Toth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.
Do you have to drive back to Henrico tonight?
I do.
Oh, my goodness.
It's a good thing I have books on tape.
Safe travels to you.
Thank y'all so much. I look forward to talking with you all in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Elections, money appropriations. Carol, you're up again.
Well, one of the good things out of some of the 2020 election, and of course, unfortunately, COVID, was that there was a grant for through the HAVA, Help America Vote, for care funds, and we've been, I guess, through the State Board of Elections, they were passing down a certain amount of care funds for us to use. So they have given a total of $58,965 to Warren County. Of course, it has to be used. It has to be used for COVID or items for the 2020 federal election, and it has to be expended by December, or it would go back to them. Pretty much like some of the other CARE Acts are. But we kind of established a general usage of some of the money, what it would go for. Would be equipment, computers, which we would need, new laptops and things for the electronic poll books, supplies, postage, and staff. Those are the kind of things that they would allow us to use the funds for. One thing that we would like to do, though, is, even though I've specified a certain amount in the early stages, is authorization that if I needed to move the money from one area to another, that would be okay. So that's what the CARES Act is about for us. And I guess we're lucky to have some funding coming down from some of the legislation. And of course, with COVID, we have to provide more protective equipment and things like that. And we do that for our workers.
Mr. Daly, do we need to do any action for this appropriation or just?
Next week.
Next week? Okay.
It's on your agenda for next week to approve the 58. We've spent a good portion of it with Pitney Bowles already. But and the computers, I think they were Windows 7, is that right?
Yeah, I've had Windows 7
So
computers.
we're replacing all of those and getting some things. You'll just approve the appropriation next week.
Okay. And we're, thank you.
Get to go
Do
home
you have
now
any
and rest.
questions?
No, any questions at all?
No, I just
I
want
don't
to
wanna
thank you
keep you
for
any longer.
continued. You
Thank
do a
you all for
wonderful
your
job.
support. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Carol.
And I greatly appreciate your help. Thank you.
And you be careful going home tonight, too.
Thank you.
The item number F now would be the discussion on the ordinance to amend and reordain section 172-2 of Warren County Code, redesignated private roads in Linden Heights subdivision as highways for law enforcement purposes. Mrs. Jordan.
Hey, good evening, Mr. Chairman and the board. So I would ask if we could, my hope today is to clarify some of the questions you had at the last public hearing. I think they were caused by some of the questions that various residents asked. But I would like to start at just looking at what has been proposed to amend the code section, and you should have received it in your packet. So right now, the way code section 172-2 reads is that all the platted roads and streets located in Shenandoah Farms subdivision, as shown on the following Warren County tax maps. Now, I apologize, it's paragraph B. It lists various tax map numbers, but then it has 23C, sheets 1 through 9. So this ordinance was enacted by the Board of Supervisors back in 1980. And at that time, there was only Shenandoah Farms. Linden Heights subdivision did not exist at that time. So the way our code section currently reads is inaccurate because it lists all the platted roads for all of the properties on tax map 23C. Well, there's a good portion of properties, I believe it's approximately 94 properties that have now split off from Shenandoah Farms, and they are the Linden Heights subdivision. So on the next, you should have a map that shows you, it looks like this, the Linden Heights subdivision. And it shows you all the properties that are part of that subdivision, and all the properties there are part of tax map 23C. And all of these properties are listed on sheets 2 and sheets 4 of tax map 23C. So the proposed amendment is, if you go back to this page, is to, let me flip here, is just to correct the sheets for tax map 23C that are actually Shenandoah Farms, and then to parse out Linden Heights subdivision, and to list tax map 23C sheets 2 and 4 as Linden Heights subdivision. This will allow enforcement. It is more clear. It's clear to law enforcement about what roads are designated as highways. And so currently, in speaking with the sheriff, who's been here all evening, but has now stepped out, my hope is that he could provide clarification from a law enforcement perspective about what this exactly means. But until he returns, I will try my best to clarify. So what this means is that currently there are certain code sections within the state code regarding motor vehicles that they cannot write tickets for violations if they occur on private roads. So one example he gave me was speeding. Another example was driving like golf carts or ATVs,
Yep.
that sort of thing. If that type of activity is conducted on a private road, then there's nothing he can do. But with these roads, if they are designated as public highways, then he can write certain tickets and he can enforce speed limits, he can enforce, he can prevent ATVs and that sort of thing driving up the road.
So they're still considered, Caitlin, this is still considered private roads. That doesn't change. It just gives law enforcement the ability to enforce the law.
Exactly. That's the only designation. The only designation is that these private roads are highways for law enforcement purposes. Now, the roads within Linden Heights, I think it's important to note, they are right-of-ways. So technically, they are available. The public has access to them because there are 50-foot right-of-ways throughout the Linden Heights subdivision. But for the purpose of amending 172-2, it would be just a designation for that purpose. Hopefully, I believe that answers a lot of the questions that were brought up. I will be glad to answer any additional questions you have or to provide further clarification if I can.
I understood that because I heard the same thing, I think it was last year when I was sitting out there at a meeting, that it had to be, I want to say it was in Shenandoah Farms or Shenandoah Shores, one of those areas where they did the same thing, and it was articulated as to what it meant. I couldn't articulate it last time to save me, But there were so many people out there that are not there tonight, and hopefully they will look at this and understand it better, that we're seeing it as government overreach. And the reason I asked for it to be clarified better was because of that. And I'm not sure that it really is going to make a lot of difference to them, but I felt like we needed to make the effort to make it more clear to them.
Right. I do think it's a mischaracterization to say it provides for government overreach, because law enforcement, even on private roads, if they get called, they can go out there.
Right.
What it is going to provide is it is going to provide law enforcement, I guess, give them more tools in their tool belt depending on the circumstances. So, if there's an issue with an ATV driver flying up and down the roads, then law enforcement can actually enforce, or at least enforce highway laws for the benefit of safety, to provide additional safety for the residents.
There we go. You're up. As it stands, on private property, the only thing that we can really enforce is reckless driving, DUI, driving under the influence of drugs, or so forth, or any misdemeanor, class 1 misdemeanor or felony charges. We can't really enforce 46.2, which is the traffic laws. We get called constantly up in that area, and throughout the county, ATVs, golf carts, dirt bikes, riding recklessly on these roads. If they are private property, no different than Mary Shady Lane and some others, not a single thing we can do about it, especially if we didn't see it. So if we see it, then we can enforce it, obviously. What a lot of people fail to understand is everybody in this county has the same authority as I have. They can walk right to a magistrate, swear out a warrant, and so forth. So really and truly, it doesn't do a lot of government oversight. It really just helps the communities, because we're still patrolling. We have sectors, we're enforcing our sectors, and obviously, as we can see it, our sheriff's deputies are all over the county, and they are visible more so than ever, and they're going to be more so than ever as we continue moving forward towards our other things. But could it help us? Could, but it also could help the communities. We could actually, for the speeding and the racing, we could actually set up speed traps, DMV grants, and so on and so forth to help enforce the reckless driving and the erratic behavior on our roadways. Any questions for me on that one?
I have a couple, I will.
Coming out.
So if the homeowner association put up a speed limit, you cannot enforce that, is that correct?
Correct.
But if they were driving recklessly, you could enforce that.
Correct. If the only signs that we can enforce, they have to be county or state approved signs.
Right.
So private property areas, we can't enforce that stuff.
So improper driving, you could enforce that.
Correct. I'd love to put a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit on my road, but I wouldn't be able to enforce it. And, if you really look at reckless driving, there's a lot of factors that go involved with reckless driving, more than just the person driving the car is in danger, surrounding bystanders' property or so forth. So it's a hard charge to get unless you actually witness it.
So if someone was driving intoxicated, you could enforce that.
Correct. Now, if I
You can
pull
do
a
that on
vehicle,
private property anyway.
what's that?
You can do that without those
Correct.
warrants.
Yeah.
And that's really the only difference.
Yeah.
The only difference is that we could enforce for four-wheelers and ATVs and so forth. I'm gonna keep my personal opinion to myself because I lost that when I got elected. But, I think there's a reason some of us move out here, and it's to get out of the city life. But the way we enforce the laws in Warren County is not going to change by making it a sanitary district, not a sanitary district. It's just not. We're still going to enforce and try to protect every individual in this county to the best of our ability.
Would one advantage be if, say, I was driving recklessly and ran into your fence, tore it up?
That is a difference now. That's where it does come in a little different, and I apologize for that. If it happens on private property, you have an accident, our deputies are, the only thing we're going to do is come up and say, hey, exchange information, get insurance, help you out, maybe even write a report on it. Typically, we don't need to. But I don't know if you've noticed, but our sheriff's office now does a lot more accidents, responds to more accidents in the county instead of calling the state police. That way we can provide a faster and better service for our residents. There's an accident you call and it is on our highways, then the FR 300's done, has to be turned over to the state if it's over $1,500 damage, and then it actually gets reported. But if it was private property, 2 people hit on Mary Shady Lane, which is private property, exchange information and go on unless there was reckless driving involved or DUI. And that's basically the difference between it all.
Thank you.
It would provide a better service for the people, I think, but it all depends on which way you're looking at it.
Thank you.
But I would say whether you want to include the language regarding Linden Heights, the way our code section currently is written is incorrect, and so I would say we would at least need to clarify the properties that are in Shenandoah Farms. Just since this issue is before the board, now is the time to make that correction, just to indicate that to acknowledge that Linden Heights has been separated from Shenandoah Farms. Does the board have any other questions? Okay.
Nope.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion for adjourn.
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
Those in favor?
Aye.
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 We're adjourned.